Let's get started. Drive safely. Turn left. Then turn right onto Fuchsia Crescent. Turn left. Then turn right onto Fuchsia Crescent. Turn right onto Fuchsia Crescent. Then at the roundabout, turn left onto Bougainvillea Drive. At the roundabout, turn left onto Bougainvillea Drive. Then use the left lane to turn left onto Snades Road. Use the left lane to turn left onto Snades Road. In 2.8 kilometers, turn left onto Hackett's Road.
Science podcast today.
It's a pleasure.
I think you're the first, Thomas, I'm very pleased to have you on the Brain Science podcast today.
It's a pleasure.
I think you're the first guest that I've had from Germany. I did interview Dr. Robert Schleip from Ulm for my other show, Books and Ideas. Where in Germany are you?
Well, I'm at the University of Mainz, where I teach in the philosophy department, but I'm also a permanent fellow at the Frankfurt Institute for Advanced Study, which is modeled after the Princeton Institute for Advanced Study.
I would love to get to go to Germany someday. I have lots of ancestors from there. Before we talk about your book, I was wondering if you would share a little bit of your background and then tell us why you wrote this book.
Well, I studied philosophy in Frankfurt, actually a very simple biography in the city where I also was born, took my PhD there. I've taught all in all at 8 different universities in Germany. I spent a year at UC San Diego, and I'm now hold a chair for theoretical philosophy, that's mostly philosophy of mind and epistemology, at the philosophy department in Mainz, and I also coordinate a research group there which deals with cognitive enhancers and neuroethics, a brand new discipline that looks into the applied ethical issues with new technologies coming out of neuroscience. So I've always had a strong focus in an area we call analytical philosophy of mind, something that is also very prominent and very good in the United States. But my contribution has been to try and open this pure philosophy of mind to interdisciplinary cooperation. That is, I'm also sort of a cognitive scientist. I have for more than 2 decades intensely talked to neuroscientists. It has got to the point that I actually designed experiments myself. So I cooperate very strongly with people also researching the mind, but in empirical fields, also in artificial intelligence and so forth. I try to build a bridge between these philosophy of mind issues and ethical issues. That's where I come from, and this popular book, I basically got bored a couple of years ago and thought you should do something else. And I tried new things. One of them was to create a 3-volume textbook for students which 2 volumes are out. The third one is coming in April. And I wanted to try if I can write a book that is accessible to normal people, to an interested,
In 300
educated
meters,
lay
use
audience,
the left lane.
which combines just those issues in the field of consciousness research, of which I think these are the important issues everybody should know about. So it's a combination of ethical and anthropological questions with these general issues like what is a conscious self, what is consciousness in the first place, what is the relationship to the brain, and so forth. I mean, we scientists, professors, tenured professors, we live off taxpayers' money. We also have something like an obligation to explain to those people that pay our salary what actually is perhaps critical or dangerous, or what is especially interesting about all this new research that's happening in this field. And it's just an attempt to communicate some of these results.
In a way, what I'm doing is very similar, although I'm not doing it on the taxpayers' money. But I agree that there's a need for scientists to communicate with the public, and that's one of the things I try to do with my podcast is make an avenue to promote that communication. Some of my listeners will buy your book. Some of them will just listen to the podcast, but at least those people will get the main ideas, even if they don't read the book.
Right, hopefully. Then the question is, why should it have been conscious?
Right.
What is the difference between an unconscious representation of the body and one that really subjectively appears? One difference seems to be everything that is conscious is something that you can attend to. You cannot direct your attention to unconscious things. It's just impossible.
Right onto angle.
So animals that would have had a conscious body image could for the first time, have directed their attention, say, to a wound they had or an itch or something like that. Also, conscious information is all that information we can form concepts about. We can start to think about our bodies, properties of ourselves. You cannot form concepts about things that do not appear to you, that are just not available on this level, where all your faculties can access this information, say about your body or your memory at once. And another very important thing is what scientists call selective motor control. You can very clearly show that being conscious makes you more context sensitive, but it also allows you to control your own movement, your behavior in a much more
You've arrived near the pickup
flexible
point.
and
It's on your left.
you can react to errors or to challenges of the situation in a better way. Say, take a sleepwalker. A sleepwalker
You're near the pickup point. We suggest contacting and waiting for the rider.
He has an unconscious body schema, a body model, and walks around. Many people think they are safe. As long as you don't wake them up, nothing happens to them. If they're up on the roof, a sleepwalker, the worst thing you can do is shout at them and wake them up. It's actually not true. Sleepwalkers hurt themselves. Sleepwalkers do run into furniture and into walls.
Hello, how are you?
Sleepwalkers do fall down
Good, thank you.
stairs. They are not completely safe like a little
Let's
child.
use your force.
Why? Because they are not
I
very
don't know what is
context
happening
sensitive.
with
They
these
are
doors.
more
I
like a
think it needs
simple
fixing.
They walk ahead. Turning a corner is already quite
start.
difficult for a sleepwalker. Reacting to, obstacles and stuff like that doesn't work as well. And if you compare a walking sleepwalker or an unconscious human patient during an epileptic absence seizure to a conscious human being, then you see exactly what the difference is, which consciousness makes. It's a certain fluidity, a flexibility, a context sensitivity. That could have been one of the advantages in evolution, to develop a conscious image of yourself.
That's an excellent example. I really appreciate that.
Now, if we think back to these natural occurring out-of-body experiences that yogis have, or some epileptics have during a seizure, or people after an accident, in these situations, the body is typically paralyzed, like in sleep paralysis or under anesthesia, and the brain is cut off from somatosensory input. You are just body blind. In that situation, if your body model is activated, it's not constrained by all these terrible, often painful inputs from the physical body. That is why you can control it freely. You can control it in a lucid dream or in a willful out-of-body experience. means you have volitional control over that conscious self model because this high bandwidth input from the physical body doesn't constrain it. There are even some neurologists who have very interesting speculative hypotheses. They say that it could be something good about an out-of-body experience. That is, people, say in combat or mountaineering who've had that in an emergency situation, always report an exquisite mental clarity in the out-of-body state. So the idea is you could have something like a division of labor in the brain. You push away all these terrible stress signals, the pain signals from your body into one unconscious corner, and you collect all these higher faculties, conscious thought, memory, attention, in some confabulated self-model that is pain-free and is constructed as if it was hovering above. So maybe that's even some kind of a healthy emergency reaction in some cases when you have an out-of-body experience. We know a number of things. We know the rubber hand illusion. We know that every healthy person, everybody of your listeners can try this out. If you take a cane, a stick, and you blindfold your eyes and you just try to walk with the stick like a blind person, after less than 30 minutes, you get tactile sensations in the tip of the stick you're using. And experiments in monkeys have shown that when they use a rake to reach for a food pellet, a raisin or something that is out of reach for them, to simplify things, the representation of the rake, of the instrument, is embedded into the representation of their body in the brain. That is, we have the self-model, and when we use a tool, we can do this because we embed it into a control hierarchy, so to speak. We fuse those two images in our brains. That's, by the way, it's a very important point about the evolution of tool use. You needed, at least I claim, a specific kind of self-model to be able to use tools. That is why we humans are so much better than chimpanzees. It's not the genome, it's the self-model that makes the difference from the ape to the human being. In any case, in that line, the point you just brought up, you could say the avatar we are offering to our subjects in cyberspace is something like an opportunity for something to identify yourself with. But it's not a tool, although we're doing experiments like that as well, that you actively use. In the original experiments, you were just passive. A passive observer watching his own back being stroked. And that's, of course, a value of these experiments, because it's a very simple, as neuroscientists say, bottom-up process. It's a multisensory integration process that leads to this sudden experience, oh, I am this experience of identification, so to speak, this bodily gut level identification of, I'm not here, I'm there, I'm in the avatar. In cyberspace, there's a strong dependence of the conscious mind on its biological, functional, physical underpinnings. But then again, the big problem is, what is the functional role? What was consciousness good for? If you want to have a fully scientific, naturalized story about consciousness, and we don't have it at this point in time, our future is open, the question would be, why should this have evolved in evolution? Why should animals have something like conscious color vision? Couldn't they have acted like machines that analyze wavelength spectra? Why should it feel like anything at all? What was the purpose of it? And you just asked about subjectivity, Ginger, and the question would be, what use could it have had for a biological organism to develop a conscious first-person perspective? What would the causal difference be of a system that has that and a system that doesn't have that? And that's, of course, a difficult question. I think it has to do with the history of the conscious self. It was good to have a model of yourself as a whole. So in the very beginning, in early animals, it was good if you had a model of your body as a whole. Not many animals probably have that. So you could imagine animals that work like insects, just like robots that have no coherent model of the world as a whole, and that have no coherent model of their own body. And then you could imagine a more advanced class of biosystems that actually have an as yet unconscious, but an inner image of how tall am I, how fast can I run, what will happen if I fall down from that should I pick a fight with this guy or rather not? Can I impress this female or rather not? So, of course, it was useful to have knowledge about your own body, and it was useful to have knowledge about the global properties of your own body, like the overall shape. If you wanted to control this in jumping, fighting, running, then you needed an inner image of your body as a whole. Okay, we can still imagine that, but
Thomas, since your book is about the nature of consciousness, I would like to start out by asking you the same question that I've asked many of my guests, and that is, what is your definition of consciousness?
well, that is a big question, and it has many answers. In philosophy of mind, there are three major problems. One is the mind-body problem. What is the relationship, the causal relationship perhaps of the mind to the brain? Then something we call intentionality. That is the question, how do brain states, mental states, manage to refer to something? How can they get this mysterious property of aboutness, of being about something else? What does it mean that our mental states have a meaning? And then the hottest topic in the last 15 years is the problem of consciousness. Why does this feel like anything at all from an inward perspective? How does all this subjective quality in our conscious lives come about? And is that a natural phenomenon? Is this pure subjective inner way what it is like to go through conscious experiences? Is that something that is open to scientific research, or is it not? And I've always been a big fan of this problem of consciousness. It got to the point that I actually founded the first scientific society, the Association for the Scientific Study of Consciousness, in California 30 years ago with a number of friends, and this society is now flowering. I even presently have the burden to be the president of this society for a year. So what we have now is a historically new situation. About 15 years ago, the problem of consciousness was slowly rising, got more and more attention in science. The first people had the idea, now we can tackle this in a rigorous and systematic, no-nonsense way. But still, many of the prominent neuroscientists thought this is something they don't want to be associated with. I learned new words from my American friends. One word was flaky. I didn't know what that was. Another word I learned was a CLM, a career limiting move. No, it is just the opposite. Every neuroscientist who wants to participate in the debate, they all need something on consciousness in their research profile. It's all the rage. It was about in the mid-90s when the first prominent neuroscientists, people like Wolf Singer or Christoph Koch, Francis Crick at UC San Diego, accepted this as a target for research that was now ripe for attack. And of course, this was greeted and observed with great interest in the philosophical community because it's actually our problem. And we've been thinking about it for centuries. And now we have this very interesting new situation that there is this mixed research community, cognitive scientists, neuroscientists trying to tackle the problem, and philosophers trying to make a contribution by laying conceptual foundations and so forth. So the answer to your question is, it is not one problem. It's a whole bundle of problems. One is, for instance, what philosophers call the unity of consciousness, the problem of global integration. If you wake up in the morning and you become conscious, then one single world appears to you. Why is it one? If the unity of consciousness experience gets lost, you usually have a serious psychiatric illness. It's an achievement in its own right that we live in one world when we're conscious, in one unified situation. This problem is so simple that most people overlook it. Another example is, what is a lived moment? This experiential fact that you are now present. There's not only this multimodal scene, the room you're in, the sounds you're listening to, but there is a representation not only of space and objects, but of time. You are located in a temporal order. There's a past and there's a future, but consciousness is always now. the nowness of it all. That's another problem that needs to be solved. I'm, of course, as a philosopher, I'm a fan of the biggest of them all. I think the most difficult problem is, why is this subjective? What does that mean? It means that as a target phenomenon for scientific research, consciousness is unique because it is always tied to an individual first-person perspective. It is you who are experiencing all this. It is tied to a subjective point of view. Chemical states, physical states, neurobiological states, neurocomputational states in your brain, they don't have that property. They can be described from the outside. As philosophers say, from the third-person perspective. We can do objective science about them, about neurocomputational properties of the conscious brain and so forth. That's not a principled problem. But then there's this mystery that there are always someone's experiences. And in a moment, you say that you flip from the third-person perspective into the first-person perspective. We want to know what my experience actually is. And that is something we haven't properly understood. You know, science always deals with publicly observable objects. But my very own sensation of green, or my very own feeling of happiness and relaxation, is not a public object. It is, in a sense which we haven't fully understood, subjective. That's the problem I'm interested in.
I guess that I was really wanting to start with the working definition that you gave in your book. Why in the book did you pick the phrase, consciousness is the appearance of a world, as your working definition? I'm going to assume it's a working definition since that's the way you defined it in the book.
Well, for a popular, accessible book, I needed a simple working definition. And the appearance of a world is just that. It happens when you wake up in the morning. A world appears to you. It happens when, from a phase of dreamless deep sleep, you enter a REM phase and you start dreaming. A dream world appears to you. If you have fainted and you wake up again, or if you wake up from anesthesia, the world appears again. If you're not conscious, you do not know that there has ever been a world, that there is anything like a world, or even yourself. This term appearance is especially important. It's not only that being conscious means to live in a world, to live in a unified situation. The core of the problem is what philosophers call phenomenal consciousness, and the word phenomenal exactly means that, how it appears to you from a subjective point of view. So the problem of consciousness is, imagine you see a red apple lying in front of you. It appears to you as if there is a red apple on the table in front of you. Now take exactly the same subjective feeling, but you're hallucinating. There is no apple on the table. What we need to understand in consciousness is what a veridical perception and what a hallucination have in common. That common element, the redness, the roundness, how the apple appears to you, how the world appears to you. That is the actual question, not if the world is out there or if you have proper knowledge of your environment. The core of the problem is the appearance as such.
So even if you're hallucinating, that's still a form of consciousness, so that's what you're really interested in, is how that's happening, not what's out there.
Right. So, of course, our mental states give us knowledge. If our perception is a correct perception of the outside, then we are somehow in contact with the world. But we can have exactly the same conscious feel, the same appearance, even if we're dreaming or if we're hallucinating. The problem of consciousness is about this appearing, the feeliness, the qualitative content of it, not if it's veridical.
Welcome to the premium version of episode 67 of the Brain Science Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Ginger Campbell. Today I'm talking with German philosopher Thomas Metzinger about his book, The Ego Tunnel, Science of the Mind and the Myth of the Self. The The transcript for this interview and all previous episodes of the Brain Science Podcast are available at brainsciencepodcast.com. This conversation is part of our ongoing...
A phrase that I hear a lot in movies and TV shows is speaking of the devil. It is a phrase that is used to refer to a person who appears as soon as you bring them up in a conversation. So as soon as they were being mentioned, get yourself together or get your act together. It means that you should stop doing whatever you're doing. You should stop fooling around and you should do something in a proper way. You should do it in a way it's supposed to be done. You can say, oh, I have some very good news for you. I'm on top of the world. It's the state of of being extremely happy. You can say, well, if I don't keep a certain level of authority in the classroom or in the house, things will get out of hand, which means that you will no longer be in control. When you want to say that a certain task is not that difficult to understand, you can just say, well, it's not a rocket science. You can fold your own laundry. Learning them slowly and over time and highlighting them when you read them in a text or trying to remember them when you are watching a movie. I remember that the first time I encountered with the phrase silver lining was in a movie title. It was the first time that I heard it and I was wondering what it means, but since I could always refer it back to the movie and the way it was used in that title and in that context, it always kind of stick to my mind. Secondly, the thing you should do is actually practice using these idioms and these phrases in your speech and in your writing. You should try to incorporate them in your conversation because the practice, the repetition is what will help solidify your understanding and make using these idioms feel a lot more natural. Now I'm going to give you a few useful examples of idioms in English and what they mean. Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of English Learning Tea Time. If you're new here, my name is Mina and we are providing content on language learning in general, but also on the other interesting topics that go with it. Acta non verba in vino veritas, carpe diem. Despite being a part of one of my Latin exams, these...
Yo, what's going on guys, it's Gabe.
It's Caleb.
And you're watching the 6th episode of the Positive Outlook Podcast.
And today we're going to be talking about courage and confidence.
Alright, so I got a quick question of the day before we get into it. Alright, well, I guess I'll start with you, Caleb, but this goes for the viewers as well. If you could be one animal, what would you want to be and why?
Tiger.
Why's that?
Because they're animals that resemble courage and fighting, and unlike the lion, they're not the king of the jungle. But that's why they have to fight every day.
Yeah.
They have that hunger in them.
Okay. To get that number one spot.
Yeah.
What do you have against lions?
I love lions, but I just like tigers better. They look cooler. They're not so...
Because tigers are kind of the underdog?
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
But they're also, you don't want to mess with a tiger.
Right.
So they're understood, but they are the underdog at the same time.
Okay, yeah.
What about you? Your favorite animal? Let's hear it. Go.
Ooh, my favorite animal?
Yep.
What if I could become an animal?
If you could become an animal. Okay, sorry.
Sorry, I mean, those are two very different things. But if I could become an animal, I would just be me. I am an animal.
No.
My mindset is
No,
unmatched.
that's not the question.
So I have to actually transmute into a different animal.
Yes. That was your question for me, so...
I would be an eagle.
An eagle.
Yeah, because eagles represent pride and freedom, and also just like all birds in general, it'd be so cool because they have nothing tying them down. They have no responsibilities. They can just get up and go.
Actually, the one thing that drew me in about eagles is they literally are independent animals.
What do you mean? Like self-sufficient?
Yeah, they don't really flock together.
Yeah.
They go after their own food for themselves. They're pretty selfish, but in a good way.
Yeah.
very independent.
That's freedom.
So
Sometimes you have to be a little selfish in life, guys. Remember, you gotta love yourself first, pay yourself first. All aspects of life. Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Gabe.
it's Caleb.
And you guys are listening to the 41st episode of the Positive Outlook podcast. And Caleb, what are we talking about today?
Today we are talking about how to make a comeback.
Yes, best comeback of the year. It's 2022. It's time to make some comebacks. 2021, 2020. They were some rough years. So now let's talk about making a comeback. Talking about how to, we talked about in episode 39, how to get out of a funk. And now we're going to kind of talk about how to get back into your life.
Yep.
So kind of two separate topics there. But before we get into it, I wanted to say a lot of our listeners come from Apple Music.
Like 25,000.
Yeah, and so I wanted to shout out to them, say thank you guys for listening so much. But if you guys want to see some more exclusive content, that's what our YouTube is for. So you can come over to our YouTube channel while you're here, maybe drop a subscribe, like the videos. But we do some vlogging here, we do some challenges here. So make sure to come check out our YouTube.
If all things go according to plan as of this moment, we will have
This
had a
one?
vlog drop
Yep.
yesterday. And it's just about how we got to 400
Have a good night
subscribers.
and take care.
Thank
you. You're welcome.
Last episode
Yeah.
with Gabe. So it should be a lot of fun. Thank you guys. Make sure to like and subscribe if you're already on YouTube. But yeah, let's jump into
Yeah,
it.
let's do it. Once again, thank you guys. Thank you all for 400 subscribers. That's incredible. We're almost to that halfway to 1,000, which is like our big milestone. We've been working towards that for a while, so almost to that big 5.
Yep.
That'll be exciting. So thank you guys. Yeah, let's get into it. This is going to be kind of a less structured video. It's going to be more free thought, more ideas that we kind of just wrote down. So do you want to start us off with something?
Sure. All right. So, sorry, gotta clear my throat.
Yeah, you're good.
Just going crazy. So life has ups and downs. Be mindful that you're now on the up, but also be proud that you got through the low point.
Yeah.
So this is when you're right out of that funk, as we referenced.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people kind of underestimate how dangerous it is and how vulnerable you can be when you're right out of a funk.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you're driving through a storm and you're past like the worst part of the storm,
Mm-hmm.
but there's still a little bit of storm left, and all
Yeah.
it takes is one tree to fall over and bam.
Yep.
So it's just kind of looking back, making sure you're proud of the steps that you took
Mhm.
to get out of the funk, but you're very very careful and cautious as you're climbing out of it.
Yeah. And one thing that is, I guess, kind of difficult to understand in those situations where you're either in a funk or you're kind of just in a situation in life where you're not happy with how things are going or where things are headed. But it's really important to remember that setbacks happen to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Challenges happen to everybody. Even the most successful people in the world have to deal with challenges. But it doesn't make you feel so alone in it, you know? And it helps you understand that there's light on the other side. Every challenge you face, you can tackle and you come out on the other side of. So that's really important to remember.
What is one of your go-tos, so to speak, when you're first out of a funk? Like, what is your very first thing that you typically do?
What do I do as in terms of to make myself happy?